The painful end of Chris Matthews' TV career occurred with just the sort of recrimination and negative PR that former Washington local news anchor and failed Democratic House candidate Kathleen Matthews, his wife of 40 years, and their adult children long hoped to avoid.
According to sources at MSNBC, Kathleen had communicated concerns over the past several months to network chief Phil Griffin, Chris's long-ago Hardball executive producer when the show aired on CNBC. She expressed worry that her husband's on-air controversies would become more frequent, more embarrassing, and more damaging to his legacy.
For months, it was known to some inside the network that Kathleen pushed for her husband, now 74, to have a more limited schedule. Instead, the MSNBC anchor found himself on TV during more major events than he had since the 2016 election cycle.
And while acting as a fixture of MSNBC's Democratic primary coverage, Matthews continually came under fire for on-air comments including likening Senator Bernie Sanders' Nevada caucus victory to Nazi Germany overtaking France during World War II, a comment for which Matthews later apologized, and asking Senator Elizabeth Warren why she would believe a woman over Michael Bloomberg regarding accusations that the ex-mayor told a pregnant employee to kill her unborn child.
And then, after The Daily Show posted on Thursday night a devastating compilation of Matthews' history of sexist and gross on-air comments to women, and a GQ piece with first-hand accusations of sexual harassment dropped Friday, the network's brass apparently had enough.
Sources said Griffin traveled to Washington, D.C. over the weekend for a series of tough conversations with the Hardball host, his wife and family, arguing that now was the time to call it quits.
Matthews was very resistant, according to these sources, insisting he stay on through the election. But he was finally persuaded that retiring, as he tried to portray his own abrupt resignation, was the only sensible option.
Amid such conversations with Griffin, the Hardball host was expected to participate in Saturday's coverage of the South Carolina primary. But hours before he would have gone on the air, he was replaced by weekend host Joy Reid.
Ultimately, on Monday evening, when he made his final on-air statement, Matthews' wife and kids were in the studio, sources said.
After my conversation with MSNBC, I decided tonight will be my last Hardball, Matthews said during his last broadcast. So let me tell you why. The younger generations are ready to take the reins. We see them in politics, the media, and fighting for their causes. They're improving the workplace. He offered a brief apology for having previously offered compliments on a woman's appearance some men, including me, might have once incorrectly thought were okay.
Despite framing his exit as a passing of the torch to a younger generation, Matthews' ouster has been publicly decried by some of his now ex-colleagues representing the old guard of cable news. The crew of MSNBC's Morning Joe tearfully mourned his exit, with co-host Mika Brzezinski musing about so-called cancel culture and whether there could have been a better way to deal with Matthews' recent controversies. Senior contributor Mike Barnicle, meanwhile, groused that his friend's departure opens the door to disturbing possibilities. He asserted that the Hardball host's exit was simply the result of toxic outrage.
Matthews' ouster has also thrown yet another wrench into ongoing uncertainty about MSNBC's lineup, which has been in flux since the network moved daytime host Ali Velshi to a weekend role. Insiders said the network had been expected to announce a new permanent schedule imminently, but Matthews' sudden departure may delay those changes.
Star News anchor Shepard Smith, who left Fox News amid feuds with the network's overtly pro-Trump primetime hosts, has long been rumored to be in talks with MSNBC. The network was interested before he decamped Fox News last year, and Page Six reported Tuesday that he is on a short list to now take over Hardball. But expectations are low, a network source said, given Smith's potentially hefty price tag.
A person with knowledge of the situation said that any connection between Matthews' departure and Smith's ongoing discussions with the network was pure speculation. The ex-Fox star is also talking with CNBC and Vice, the source told the Daily Beast. He's talking to all the players but doesn't necessarily want the big shiny thing. While it has been reported Smith could return to the air as early as June, industry insiders believe he will reappear closer to the election.
Current MSNBC hosts have also been floated as potential replacements for Matthews. Joy Reid, whose weekend show enjoys good ratings, would make sense, insiders said, considering her popularity among the network's more hardcore viewers. Nicole Wallace, an anti-Trump Republican whose 4 p.m. daytime broadcast has brought in robust viewership, has also been discussed. However, sources said she'd prefer not to move to primetime because of family obligations.
Another name floated by Page Six was Steve Kornacki, who demonstrated quick thinking despite being visibly stunned on Monday evening while taking over the rest of the hardball broadcast following Matthews' shocking exit. But sources told the Daily Beast that despite his role in stepping up to fill that hour, he's highly unlikely to be rewarded with the primetime hosting gig.
Lachlan Cartwright contributed reporting.
A Democratic primary marked by dramatic shifts in momentum appeared to take another one early on Tuesday night, as former Vice President Joe Biden jumped out to quick, decisive victories in several major Super Tuesday states.
The Associated Press reported that Senator Bernie Sanders, IBT, was poised to notch a victory in his home state of Vermont. But the bigger surprise was that, as soon as the polls closed, Biden was declared the winner in Virginia, a state with a potentially large delegate haul that seemed more of a toss-up just days prior. Then, 30 minutes later it happened again, this time in North Carolina where Biden had campaigned just hours before his massive South Carolina win on Saturday. After another 30 minutes, Alabama was added to Biden's column. Biden's strength in the South continued from there, with a win coming later in the evening in Oklahoma, Tennessee and Arkansas.
But the biggest victory of all may have been in Minnesota, which was called for Biden shortly before 10 p.m. The state had switched from a caucus in 2016 to a primary in 2020 and results hurt Sanders, who had 61% and 60% of the vote there when running against Hillary Clinton.
The early part of the night wasn't a complete loss for Sanders, whose strengths were visible elsewhere on the map. The Vermont Independent claimed an early victory in Colorado, which returned to a primary system after 20 years of holding caucuses, giving him a potentially large delegate haul. He also seemed to be well-positioned in the biggest primary of the evening, California, which was unlikely to report final results for a matter of days. One feature that seemed likely to help Sanders in those two states was the fact that there was early voting, meaning that many ballots were cast prior to Biden's South Carolina win. All told, 14 states were voting with more than 1,300 delegates up for grabs.
Just a few days ago, it seemed likely that Sanders would score major victories across the board on Tuesday and solidify his standing as the undisputed frontrunner in the race. But Biden's win in South Carolina and the subsequent decision of several other candidates, Sen. Amy Klobuchar, DMN, former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg, DIN, and former Representative Beto O'Rourke, DTX, to suspend their campaigns and endorse him have altered the primary's dynamics.
Sanders, well-funded and steady for months, built a strong infrastructure in several Super Tuesday states, most notably in Texas and California. Biden, meanwhile, spent the last 48 hours playing catch-up, bolstered by the primary win, the endorsements, and an infusion of cash. As a result, it increasingly looks like Sanders and Biden will find themselves in a dogfight for delegates, potentially all the way up to the convention in Milwaukee this July.
Other states that are set to vote on Tuesday include Arkansas, Maine, Minnesota, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Utah.
Biden and Sanders were not the only two candidates competing on Tuesday. Senator Elizabeth Warren, DMA, has remained in the race as well, hoping to accrue enough delegates, which she can get by clearing the 15% threshold in states or in a congressional districts, so that she could head to the convention with leverage and, perhaps, a chance to emerge as a consensus candidate in a divided field.
Former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who was competing in primaries for the first time this cycle, has adopted a similar strategy. Having spent roughly $500 million on his campaign, Bloomberg conceded on Tuesday that he likely would not get to the convention with the majority of delegates. Instead, he said, "A contested convention is the only way I can win." Representative Tulsi Gabbard, D-High, remains in the race as well but was not expected to reach the needed threshold in any of the major contests.
While Warren is likely to compete for a win in her home state of Massachusetts, early prognostications did not show a state in which Bloomberg was likely to emerge victorious, though he did win the caucus Tuesday night in the U.S. territory of American Samoa. The former mayor, however, appears keen on continuing his campaign past Tuesday. An advertising buying firm reported that he had already placed new ads in states that vote soon, including Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Michigan, Missouri, Ohio, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Washington.